It is silent. Unnervingly silent. You walk the stone corridors of Versailles, and each step is swallowed by velvet carpets soaked with centuries of ceremony. The air is thick with candle smoke and something else, something fouler. A scent you can't name, but that clings to your skin like sweat after a fever. It curls through the draperies, seeping from under a gilded door at the far end of the hall. A door no one dares open anymore. Outside, the gardens rot in the August heat. Roses sag with overripeness. The fountains run sluggish. The Sun King's world, once ordered, glittering, divine, feels like a stage at the end of its play, left in ruin after the curtain has fallen. You can hear them. Behind the door. Whispers. Footsteps muffled in panic. A priest's voice reciting prayers in Latin, low and urgent. A groan. Or was it a growl? No one will tell you what's happening. But everyone already knows. The king, the man who was France, is dying. And it's not the kind of death one whispers gently about. It is a death that punishes. The king no longer speaks. We wait. Memoir of the Duke of St. Simon, August 1715. Inside that chamber, the man who called himself the sun is being devoured. His leg is turning black. His skin festers beneath perfumed sheets. The doctors have stopped prescribing anything. They only watch now. The court holds its breath. Versailles has become a mausoleum that doesn't yet know it's a tomb. No one dares say it aloud, but it drips from every glance. If the king dies, the world collapses. This isn't just a body breaking down. This is a divine order unraveling. A god becoming meat. The church bells remain still, but the silence feels louder than sound. The sunlight that once danced across these marble floors feels colder, heavier, like something watching. Time itself has slowed, as if afraid to move without permission. You pass the grand mirrors, once used to reflect glory. Now they seem to reflect only shadows. And in those shadows, a boy, barely 5, clutching his governess's gown. A priest gripping a vial of sacred oil. A nobleman pacing until his wig begins to slip. Everyone is waiting. For something final. The air tastes like rust. And from under that door, the scent worsens. Death, you realize, has already entered the palace. But this was no ordinary death. No quiet slipping away, no gentle last breath. This was a performance. A final act written in wrought, ritual, and royal dread. And you are about to witness the most horrifying death France has ever staged. His body was once myth. Chiseled by portraitists into symbols of power, wrapped in gold-threaded robes, carried by armies of servants and worshipped by nobles who bowed before his every breath. But beneath the brocade and ceremony, the machine was already rusting. By the time he reached 76, Louis XIV was no longer the invincible deity of Versailles. He was a prisoner inside a shell that betrayed him daily. His bones cracked with every movement. His joints swelled with gout, turning once graceful gestures into stiff winces. Diabetes corroded his strength, and his breath came shallow, labored, as though the air itself no longer respected him. The Sun King, who had once danced through endless corridors in heels taller than his rivals, now had to be helped from bed. His walk, if it could be called that, was an uneven hobble shadowed by attendants trained not to notice his weakness. In private, he winced. In public, he smiled. The mask remained. But the body beneath it? That was collapsing. They whispered about his abscesses. Boils that formed and burst with infection. Skin that peeled. Eyes that dimmed. Even his teeth, once proudly bared in painted portraits, had blackened or fallen away. What remained was a man constantly trembling on the edge of humiliation, barely held together by fabric, loyalty, and delusion. Versailles was his triumph. But now it had become a golden cage. He could not escape its mirrors, which reflected his decay in infinite angles. He could not walk its marble halls without dozens of eyes studying the tremor in his hands or the quiver in his voice. There were too many ears, too many mouths. Too many people who noticed. And still, he tried to rule. The physicians, desperate to preserve his illusion of godliness, became his shadow. They monitored everything. His stool, his urine, his breath, his temperature. They recorded each pulse as though the rhythm itself could stop time. Every morning began not with command, but with measurement. How did His Majesty sleep? Had His Majesty passed anything in the night? What color? What consistency? No detail was too small. Because even the smallest failure of the body could signal the collapse of the divine. When the fever started, they said it was nothing. When the leg swelled, they blamed age. When he began grimacing in pain after standing, they offered him rose water and prayers. A few muttered about sciatica. A few others nodded solemnly, as if afraid to say what they truly suspected. They reached for what they knew, leeches, bleeding, and bitter tonics mixed with silver or mercury. He was drained with syringes the size of daggers. Enemas were administered in golden tubes, forced into a body already exhausted from rot. He swallowed crushed pearls, deer horn, opium. Nothing helped. Because what was inside him now was not something that could be drawn out. It was not imbalance. It was decay. And still, he ruled. Even as he winced through council meetings. Even as pus stained the silks beneath his breeches. Even as the smell of his dying flesh began to cling to the edges of his bedchamber. He continued to sign edicts. He nodded through military briefings. He listened as nobles lied to him about the glory of his legacy. He endured it all with the pride of a king who believed that dying was beneath him. But something inside him was tearing loose. Not just the infection. Not just the gangrene. Something deeper. Something that could not be bled or prayed away. And if you're still watching and haven't subscribed, just know, people forget rulers like Louis XIV not because their stories are boring, but because they get buried beneath modern noise. Don't bury history. Subscribe to Tale of History. If you won't, at least tell us why in the comments. Because this isn't just about a man. This is about what power does to flesh. And how flesh, in the end, always wins. The walls of Versailles were never built for silence. They echoed with laughter, music, ceremony, choreographed noise that kept the illusion alive. But now, the music has stopped. The courtiers walk slower. Their voices drop to whispers. And every whisper carries the same question, smuggled behind powdered smiles and perfumed sleeves: is the king dying? They don't say it aloud. Not yet. But they know. The scent escaping from the king's chambers has changed. It is heavier, fouler, no longer masked by incense or rose water. The servants who change his sheets keep their heads bowed and their mouths sealed, but their eyes are wide with horror. The tapestries along the halls cannot contain the truth, they muffle sound, but not fear. Rumors sprout like mold. Some say the king hasn't left his bed in days. Others claim his leg is splitting open, leaking black blood into the mattress. One maid swears she saw worms crawling on the floor beneath the royal canopy. They whisper in stairwells. In gardens. In salons. Not too loudly, never too loudly, because the wrong ear can end your life in this place. Versailles may shimmer with gold, but its foundations are built on secrets, and every shadow is listening. The courtiers still bow when his name is spoken. But they bow slower. With uncertainty. Like they're preparing to kneel for someone else. And behind closed doors, factions begin to shift. The nobles whose fortunes were tied to Louis's endless reign now look elsewhere. Some to the boy. The 5-year-old heir who still plays with wooden soldiers while his great-grandfather rots behind the drapes. Others look abroad. To Spain. To the Holy Roman Empire. To alliances that will become necessary when the old god finally dies. Letters begin to fly. Not through official messengers, but through trusted hands and secret compartments. Sealed with wax. Coded in gesture. Slipped into pockets and corsets, bound for embassies, for foreign courts, for the ears of kings who already smell blood in the water. And then come the whispers of poison. It has happened before. It will happen again. The king has many enemies, they say. Did someone slip a powder into his drink? Did a bitter courtier hire an apothecary from the slums of Paris? They speak of aconite, arsenic, belladonna. The apothecaries of the court protest their innocence, but their hands tremble. Even the king's own doctors begin watching one another more closely. The queen, Madame de Maintenon, does not speak. She stays behind veils. Her rooms are shuttered. Some say she is praying. Others say she is weeping. Still others believe she is already orchestrating the transition of power. She does not visit him as often now. Perhaps she cannot bear the stench. Or perhaps she is afraid of being caught in the wreckage. Versailles begins to change its rhythm. Chamberlains walk faster. Messengers sweat through their uniforms. The bells haven't rung, but the court is already mourning. Some bring gifts to the young dauphin. Small tokens. A book. A trinket. A smile too wide to be innocent. The boy does not understand. But the adults do. They always do. The king is not dead. Not yet. But in the minds of those who orbit him, the throne is already empty. If you can feel the breath of treason in these halls, if you can see the smiles that stretch like knives, then you understand why stories like these vanish from textbooks. Power is never passed gently. It's stolen, in whispers. And if you're still watching and haven't subscribed, ask yourself, why ignore the bloodstains behind the gold? Subscribe to Tale of History. And if you won't, let the rest of us know in the comments what you're afraid of. Because the court knows what's coming. They can smell it. And they are already choosing sides. The leg has turned. Not stiff, not bruised, black. What began as a complaint of discomfort, a dull ache in the shin, has now revealed its true face. Beneath layers of linen and ceremony, the flesh has rotted. The king's leg is cold to the touch, swollen like a corpse already days dead. And when the bandages are peeled back, there is no longer any illusion left to preserve. It oozes. Thick, foul, the color of tar. The skin peels away in clumps. Beneath it, dark tissue, no longer alive. Muscle that has liquefied. Bone that seems to weep. Even the royal surgeons flinch. The smell cannot be masked. Not with incense, not with lavender oils, not with holy water. It creeps through the doorframes, lingers in the tapestries, clings to the hair and clothing of those unfortunate enough to be summoned to the king's side. Servants now draw lots for the task of tending to him. Physicians bathe in rosewater after every visit, but the odor seeps into their pores. Versailles is gagging. And still, the physicians argue. One, young, idealistic, demands the leg be taken. He speaks of survival. Of duty. Of surgical courage. Amputation, he says, is the only way. Another, older and weary, shakes his head. He's seen this before. The leg is a symptom. The rod is already deeper. Cutting it would only invite more agony. Perhaps a quicker death, but not a cleaner one. The court stands divided, watching the king's body like generals at a battlefield. One wound, and a nation holds its breath. But it is the king who decides. He waves away the talk of blades and saws. His voice is hoarse, barely audible, but it carries authority wrapped in resignation. God has given me this body, he whispers, and I will not mutilate it. So the leg stays. And so does the gangrene. The rot begins to spread. Slowly at first, crawling from ankle to knee, knee to thigh. The skin bubbles in places. Blisters form and burst, releasing fluid that stains even the silk sheets. Flies gather at the windows. Some manage to slip in. They hover near his wounds, land on his skin, lay eggs in the damp hollows of his bandages. The court physicians bring in cloth soaked in vinegar. It does nothing. They burn myrrh and sulfur to ward off infection. It does nothing. They pray. Even the Sun King cannot sweat out what festers inside him now. There are days when he drifts into a sleep that resembles death. Days when his eyes open, and he no longer recognizes the faces bending over him. Days when he moans in Latin. Days when he forgets he is king. No one speaks of recovery anymore. They speak only of time. How much of it is left? When to announce? When to begin the mourning? When to begin the war for what comes after? This part of the story isn't told in schools. And it won't be pushed by algorithms. If you've made it this far, it means you value the raw, unvarnished truth of history. So subscribe now to Tale of History, or leave a comment explaining why you'd rather watch fairy tales. Because what's coming is no bedtime story. This is history stripped of its polish, left to rot in a royal bed. And the king still breathes. But just barely. He asks for the boy. The court falls into a hush deeper than silence. Messengers glance at one another, unsure if the request is genuine. Or if it's delirium speaking. But the king's voice is clear this time. Hoarse, hollow, wet with fever, but unmistakably a command. Bring me the child. And so they do. The dauphin, barely 5 years old, swaddled in velvet, his cheeks still round with youth, is led into the chamber of death. He clutches the hand of his nurse, his other hand clutching a carved wooden horse. He has no idea why he's been summoned. No idea that the man rotting in the bed is handing him an empire too vast for comprehension, too broken to refuse. The air in the room is thick. Too thick for a child. Perfume battles the stench of decay, but it's losing. Curtains hang heavy. The candles, dozens of them, flicker like they, too, are suffocating. The boy stops at the foot of the bed. He looks up, hesitant, afraid to step closer. Louis XIV turns his head. The effort costs him. Veins bulge. A tremor moves through his arm, as if the act of looking, of seeing his heir, costs more than any war he ever waged. His lips move. Those in the room lean in. Few can hear what he says. But the nurse lifts the boy gently and carries him forward until he is eye to eye with his great-grandfather. And then, the king speaks. Not to the boy, but through him. A voice worn down to embers, delivering a speech meant not for a child, but for a future monarch. You must never forget that you are nothing without France, and that France is nothing without God. He pauses. Breath hitching. You will be flattered. Lied to. Praised beyond reason. Believe none of it. A tear escapes the corner of his eye, or perhaps it is just sweat. Do not love war. It will love you. It will charm you. But it will devour you. The boy looks to his nurse. Confused. Afraid. He clings tighter to her shoulder. Louis tries to lift his hand in blessing. It shakes, dangles, but eventually settles on the child's head. A limp touch. Still symbolic. Still sacred. And then, he leans forward, draws his lips close to the boy's ear. No one hears what he whispers. Not the priest. Not the nurse. Not even the physician crouched behind the curtain, recording every moment with the meticulousness of a chronicler. Only one person knows. Madame de Maintenon. Watching from the shadows. Face pale, knuckles white, lips moving in silent prayer. She hears it. And she says nothing. When it is done, the nurse carries the boy back. He looks once over her shoulder. His eyes lock with the king's. But the king is no longer looking. He's staring past him. Past the chamber. Past the ceiling of Versailles. The boy will not see him again. He returns to his quarters, given sweets to quiet his nerves. He's told his great-grandfather is merely resting. That all is well. That one day, he too will be king. He nods. Sucks on a honeyed fig. Plays with his carved horse. He doesn't know that the crown has already begun to lower onto his head. He doesn't know the rot he will inherit. He doesn't know the wolves already circling. The king is dead, but he doesn't know it yet. And if you're still here, still watching through this veil of decay and destiny, then you understand that power isn't passed in coronations. It's passed in whispers, in warnings, in rooms thick with death. Subscribe to Tale of History if you know that history is not a timeline, it is a haunting. And if you won't, step into the comments and tell us, what more do you need before you remember the dead? The flies come first. Tiny black specks circling above the king's bed, drawn to the sourness of flesh losing its war with time. They land on his sheets, his mouth, the crusted edges of his wounds. Servants swipe at them with cloths, but there are always more. As if death itself has wings. Then come the priests. Robed in black and red, they move with rehearsed solemnity, as if every step had been choreographed 100 years before this moment. They carry relics, bone fragments of saints, thin crucifixes wrapped in cloth, silver vessels trembling with sacred oil. They do not look at the leg. They do not comment on the smell. Their eyes stay fixed ahead, trained like soldiers marching into holy war. The king lies still beneath them. Barely breathing. But his chest still rises. This is what matters. For now. A velvet canopy is lowered above the bed. The relics are arranged. Candles are relit. The incense is burned not to sanctify, but to smother the stench. The scent of frankincense and rot mingles in the air, creating something unholy. Something unforgettable. The room is divided now. Physicians to the left. Priests to the right. And between them, the body of a god collapsing into meat. Louis slips in and out of lucidity. His eyes flutter. His mouth trembles with names, some familiar, others long dead. He asks for his mother. Then Colbert. Then Maria Theresa. One moment, he's lucid enough to mutter commands. The next, he's calling for his hunting dogs. He says he sees them. His ancestors. Watching from the corners. Silent. Waiting. The priests begin the ritual. Unction. Oil on the forehead. On the chest. On the hands. They speak the words slowly, reverently. The last rites, whispered through trembling lips, as if God himself might pause to listen. The physicians interrupt. One insists on checking his pulse. Another demands that the king be turned to drain the infection. The priest objects. The ritual cannot be disturbed. They argue, not loudly, not violently, but with the quiet intensity of men who know they are standing inside the final moment of something colossal. Voices rise. Hands shake. And in the far corner of the room, behind a curtain, Madame de Maintenon is gone. No one saw her leave. No one heard the door. But her chair is empty. Her veil is folded. She has vanished like a ghost that knew its purpose had ended. Some say she went to pray. Others say she fled. Still others believe she simply could not bear to watch the man she had once loved become a symbol too broken to believe in. The room carries on without her. The priests anoint. The doctors record. The king twitches, then stills. The flies remain. You're seeing death stripped of its romance, because that's what Tale of History does. We give you truth, not theater. If you're brave enough to keep watching, be brave enough to hit subscribe. And if you won't, type it in the comments, why not? Because this isn't death behind curtains. This is death in gold, soaked in oil and incense, crawling with flies. This is the end of a man who ruled for 72 years. And this is only the beginning. September 1st, 1715. At precisely 8:15 in the morning, the sun dies. Not in fire. Not in battle. Not in glory. But in silence. His chest does not rise. His mouth does not tremble. His eyes, once sharp enough to pierce the masks of 1,000 courtiers, are glass. Fixed. Open. And still. The physicians hold their breath, as if daring to be wrong. The priest finishes his final prayer, whispering absolution into a room already heavy with failure. One of the servants weeps. Another crosses himself. One of the nobles looks to the door, already calculating the path to power now that the king's blood has stilled. The official moment is written down. Parchment and ink to confirm what everyone already knew. France is no longer ruled by Louis XIV. A message is sent to the bell towers of Paris. An order that has not been given in over 70 years. And when the bells ring, their toll is not mournful. Not gentle. They are loud. Thunderous. They split the sky with the weight of history snapping into place. In the royal courtyard, carriages stop. Conversations halt. Gloved hands touch chests. Knees bend. And in a low voice that echoes across centuries, the herald speaks, Le roi est mort. Vive le roi. The king is dead. Long live the king. The phrase is not a contradiction. It is a transfer. A bridge between corpses and crowns. The Sun King has fallen, but his shadow will not fade easily. Inside Versailles, the transformation is immediate. Black drapes are hung across balconies. Mirrors are covered. Paintings are veiled in mourning cloth. Courtiers trade their silks for darker tones, their jewels for restraint. Music ceases. Laughter is forbidden. Every hall now sounds like a mausoleum. The Dauphin, the little king in waiting, is now simply, the king. He does not yet know what that means. The body remains in its bed for hours, untouched, surrounded by a stillness so profound it could be mistaken for reverence. Or fear. Eventually, guards are stationed at the door. Only a chosen few may enter. Even fewer may look. When the public is finally allowed to see the king, it is under strict control. A velvet rope, a procession, a line of silence. They file past slowly, eyes wide with disbelief. Not because a king has died, but because the image of the king has ruptured. He is bloated. His skin is pale, bruised with shadows. The leg is wrapped, but the stench escapes. The face is waxy. Pulled tight in death. No longer divine. Women faint. Men whisper prayers. Children are turned away. Not because of grief. Because of fear. The sun is dead. And all that remains is a husk, dressed in lace, bathed in rot, sealed in ceremony. The end of a reign is not a line in a book. It is the sound of bells. The silence of a mirror. The smell behind a curtain. And if you're still here, still walking these final steps with us, then you understand that history is not made of dates. It is made of decay. It is made of the sounds people don't talk about. The smells they try to hide. The feelings no monument dares to carve in stone. Subscribe to Tale of History. Because if you can watch a king die like this and still pretend history is polite, then maybe you need to leave a comment explaining what history you've been taught. Because we do not bury the truth here. We exhume it. They lay him on a marble slab. The flesh has already begun to loosen. Beneath the silks and jewels, the body of Louis XIV is no longer recognizable as a god, or even a king. It is bloated. Misshapen. The skin splits under its own weight. The scent is unbearable. Not even the finest perfumes of Versailles can conquer what's begun inside him. The autopsy begins at dawn. It is not a private affair. Royal death is spectacle. Every slice, every examination, is documented by court physicians, witnessed by nobles, overseen by clergy. They call it medicine. But it is theater. And no curtain is drawn. The abdomen is opened first. A wave of gas escapes, hot, foul, wet with rot. The attending surgeons gag behind their handkerchiefs. Inside, the organs are black. The intestines, mottled with green and purple, release a liquid so foul the chambermaids faint. The stomach has already liquefied. The liver crumbles at the touch. But it is the leg that draws the most horrified attention. From the hip to the ankle, it is necrotic. Entirely dead. The muscle is gone. The skin is rotted through in patches, flayed open, revealing tendons reduced to sludge. Bone is visible in places, darkened, porous, beginning to separate. No one speaks as they examine it. There is nothing left to say. The king did not die of age. He was devoured from within. And still, tradition must be followed. The embalming begins. His body is packed with herbs, soaked with alcohol, wrapped in linens. Incisions are stuffed with resin and wax. Perfumed oils are poured into his mouth, his nose, his ears, as if they might somehow restore what was lost. But Louis XIV cannot be made whole again. His body, by royal custom, is not buried as one. The heart is cut out, placed in a crystal reliquary, and sent to the Church of the Jesuits. It is sealed with wax, surrounded by gold, carried by men who tremble with the weight of something once sacred, now merely human. The intestines, still warm, still weeping, are placed in another container, sent to the Church of Notre Dame. A priest blesses them as they pass through the gate, his voice cracking mid-prayer. And the body, what remains of it, is prepared for the Basilica of Saint Denis, the resting place of kings. Wrapped in layers of cloth, encased in lead, then again in oak, then again in lead. As if the world must be protected from what it has just witnessed. But even in death, the king cannot find peace. Rumors begin. They say the reliquaries were tampered with. That pieces of the king were stolen, his teeth, his bones, a lock of his hair. That a priest kept the heart too long before sealing it. That the heart shriveled in his hands like old parchment. That it bled one last time. Others say a portion of the intestine was swapped, replaced with that of a criminal. That the wax seals were broken in secret. That a surgeon took a fragment of rib as a relic, wrapped it in silk, and sold it to a Spanish ambassador. No one knows the truth. And that is what makes it powerful. Beyond the gates of France, the news spreads like fire. In Madrid, they read the announcement over wine. In London, it is printed in broadsheets beneath drawings of the Sun King ascending into heaven. In Vienna, diplomats toast quietly, one less complication to manage. But in Rome, the cardinals debate his soul. Was he the most Christian of kings, or the most prideful? In Amsterdam, merchants smile. The man who drained their coffers with war is gone. In Prussia, a letter is burned after reading. A sentence underlined twice, the throne is empty. But the game begins again. This is what power looks like when the body fails. Not silence. Not respect. But rumor, fragments, and theft. A kingdom scavenging its fallen idol for anything of value. And if you're still with us, if you've walked this far into the chamber of the dead, then you know why these stories matter. Because power is not remembered. It is dismantled. Piece by piece. Body by body. Word by word. Subscribe to Tale of History. Or enter the comments and tell us why you'd rather look away. But remember, the heart of a king still beats somewhere. And not all graves stay closed. The king is buried. The heart entombed. The banners lowered. But what now lies in the earth is not the man, only his meat. The glory, the vision, the myth, that lingers, but not unchanged. It festers. Louis XIV, the Sun King, the very embodiment of absolutism, who once declared, "L'état, c'est moi, I am the state," has been stripped down to a cautionary tale. He reigned longer than any monarch in European history. For 72 years, France bent to his will. Nobles danced to his rhythm. Wars were waged because he desired it. Art was commissioned in his image. Versailles itself was built as a monument to his existence. He believed he was chosen. Anointed. Eternal. And for a time, it almost seemed true. But now, Versailles echoes. The gold still shines, but no one sees it the same way. It no longer dazzles, it blinds. The mirrors reflect not splendor, but a lie too long believed. The halls are quieter now. The music has soured. The perfumes feel heavier. As though they are covering something rotten that was never truly removed. Beneath the chandeliers, cracks form. His wars left France in ruin. His palaces, funded by blood and taxes, drained the people he never met. While he danced, they starved. While he ordered marble from Italy, they buried children in shallow, unmarked graves. And still, he told them it was for glory. But what is glory, if it cannot outlive a body? Even as they buried him, the seeds of rebellion were already germinating. He believed he was stamping out chaos by centralizing power. Instead, he lit the fuse of a revolution. It would not erupt in his lifetime. But it would come. And when it did, they would tear the nobility apart with the same hunger that once built Versailles. His heirs would be guillotined. His palace stormed. His name spat upon by the very citizens who once called him divine. What did he leave behind? Not peace. Not prosperity. Not permanence. He left echoes. Warnings. A masterpiece of control that eventually turned on itself. He left a legacy gilded in decay. And still, people remember him. Not because of what he built. But because of how it all fell apart. This isn't about Louis. It's about all of us. Power fades. Flesh rots. But stories, they endure. If you don't believe that, tell us why. But if you do, join us. Subscribe to Tale of History. Because this was not just the death of a man. This was the death of glory. The throne is empty. Not draped in black, not veiled in silk, just empty. A golden seat without a body. A symbol without a pulse. Outside, the mist coils over Versailles like a shroud. The fountains are still. The air is damp with mourning. The gardens, once manicured for parades and pageants, seem overgrown, tired. A single crow cuts through the silence, then disappears into the grey. In the Hall of Mirrors, the chandeliers glisten as they always have, but the light feels colder. The floorboards echo too loudly. The mirrors reflect only absence now, gilded corridors haunted by ceremony, power, and silence. And in a distant room, sealed behind glass, hangs the death mask. The face is slack. The lips curled inward. The eyes half-lidded, robbed of their arrogance. This is not the king painted by Rigaud, not the marble statue that crowned Versailles. This is what remains when art and ambition no longer interfere, just a face, emptied of will. Fade back. A portrait of Louis at 23. Proud. Regal. Cloaked in velvet, eyes fixed on destiny. A boy dressed as a god. A ruler baptized in myth. Now back to the mask. The flesh that fell apart. The king no longer king. Just wax, rot, and silence. Two images. Two truths. One man. He called himself the sun. He believed he was the center of gravity, that all would orbit him, forever. But even the sun burns out. Even it collapses under its own weight. Louis XIV wanted to illuminate history. Instead, he cast shadows so long they swallowed the truth. He reigned to be remembered. But not like this. Because this is what history does, when it is told without fear. It reminds us that glory dims, flesh fails, and even the brightest men die alone. He wanted to be the sun. But even the sun must set. Tale of history exists to uncover what others polish away. If you've watched this far, why hide in the shadows? Subscribe. Or share in the comments what's stopping you. We dare you.